Decoding Buddhism, Decoding the Lost Teachings of the Buddha, Chapter 2. A Buddhist term long misunderstood. Through my research, I found lost teachings and esoteric knowledge that unveil the serene simplicity in Gautama Buddha's profound insight into the nature of the soul of man and its destiny. These insights resolve long-standing ambiguities and mind-benders that have confounded seekers for millennia, offering a fresh perspective that can align our spiritual practices more closely with Buddha's original teachings. The essence of this revelation is rooted in a single term that has been long misconstrued. What if the concept captured by this term, previously lost in translation or misunderstood in transmission, holds a key to unlocking a more profound understanding beyond Buddha's teachings on the cessation of suffering? What if it guards a deeper insight into the soul and the eternal? This revelation could fundamentally transform our perception of modern Buddhism as we know it. Let us reimagine the Buddha's wisdom teachings to profoundly rethink our approach to spiritual enlightenment and practice, exploring beyond conventional wisdom. I hereby extend to you an invitation to step beyond the conventional and embrace the eternal journey of the soul. Your soul. A prajna moment. My unique journey into Buddhism began a few summers ago when I experienced a prajna moment, an awakening to the Buddha's teachings on the nature of the self and the soul. One Sunday morning at the end of summer, I woke up well-rested and found myself alone with no distinct plans for the day. Seizing the moment, I grabbed my cup of tea and stepped outside. I sat down by my garden pond, basking my face in the warmth of the sun, while listening to the birds absorbed in their serenade. A profound sense of peace enveloped me, one that arose from deep within. Centered in my blissful state, I began to reflect on my life and the recent insights I had gained about the Buddha and his path. After years of practicing spiritual teachings and wisdom traditions from both East and West, I found myself increasingly drawn to Buddhist logic and ideals, as well as Eastern thought. Initially, I had viewed the Buddha's Noble Eightfold Path as a guide to living a moral and contemplative life, a way to cultivate inner peace and enlightenment in pursuit of the ultimate goal, nirvana. While this view, in the most basic sense, was accurate, I realized I had notably underestimated its depth. I had also studied the workings of karma in various traditions, but had not explored Gautama's perspective on it in detail. Gautama's teachings on karma have had a transformative effect on my heart, mind, and soul, as they are essential for understanding how karma accumulates and impacts the individual soul. This realization was exciting, as my favorite field of study is karma and reincarnation. And so, it was time for me to immerse myself in Gautama's deeper teachings. While researching the topic of the Buddha and karma, I had a key insight. The Buddha's teachings reveal a powerful method for balancing karma at a much greater speed than that of established traditions. This was a new perspective I had not previously considered. It became strikingly evident that the Buddha's Eightfold Path was intentionally designed as an accelerated karma balancing process, on 8 distinct levels, to hasten the journey towards soul liberation. This approach holds the potential to break the samsaric cycle of karma and endless rebirths within a single lifetime or in just a few. Hence, the Buddha's Eightfold Path marked a departure from traditional Eastern teachings, which suggests that liberation may require numerous incarnations spanning immense periods of time. These time periods, as explained in the Puranas, have often been deliberately portrayed as extremely long in duration, leading people to procrastinate, behaving as though their destinies are predetermined, their karma immutable, and change out of reach. But the Buddha challenged this notion, showing that karma can be dynamically balanced through deliberate effort and right practice. However, I am getting ahead of myself. We will delve into the nuances of karma in later chapters. The ultimate mind-bender. Back in the present moment, sitting by my pond, I recalled the night before and the past few days spent in my study. I had uncovered something that most spiritual seekers fail to grasp about Buddhism, something not openly or eagerly shared by Buddhists, because if properly understood, it would cause most seekers to cringe and turn on their heels, as it appears to be a negation of life itself. I am speaking about the Buddhist doctrine of anatta, the doctrine of no self or no soul. The whole idea shook me to my core. I exclaimed, "This cannot be. It seriously contradicts my spiritual training and the spiritual traditions that I have studied." This is why I spent days and weeks intensely researching this doctrine from every perspective I could explore. Regardless of where I looked, the prevailing narrative among the main schools of Buddhism appeared remarkably consistent, emphasizing the mainstream no-soul concept of anatta, a concept that was utterly illogical to me. Having a soul was something I had always considered a self-evident truth, a fundamental constant to the teachings of all world religions, East and West, including the Ascended Master teachings. This turned what I knew on its head, and I could not let it go. The no-self, no-soul ideology surfaces undetected to the untrained seeker, as it is woven into the fabric of all Buddhist thought. The mainstream anatta narrative is so pervasive, dominating the online discourse, including wiki and encyclopedia searches, scholarly articles, Buddhist lectures, podcasts, YouTube videos, and websites, so much so that we are led to believe it must be true that the Buddha taught, "We are soulless." It was fascinating to observe how far Buddhists were willing to go to champion the concept of self-negation and examine the logic they used to argue for their own non-existence. What struck me as alarming was that those discussing the anatta concept appeared not to fully comprehend the intricate ramifications of their arguments. They went as far as to assert that those who believe in a soul are misinterpreting Buddha's doctrines, are deluded and full of fear, merely seeking loopholes in Buddha's teachings to dispute the anatta doctrine. Such arguments often lead to debates among schools and scholars that never seem to end. As we delve into Buddhism together, I hope to illuminate several contrasting perspectives, allowing you to determine which resonates most with you. Here's an example that stands out. Buddhists cannot properly explain the concepts of karma and reincarnation without acknowledging the existence of the soul. In their attempts to justify an already flawed doctrine, Buddhist monks and scholars of the 4th century CE, during the doctrinal developments of the Yogacara school, further complicated the matter. They likely invented the term mindstream, Chitta Santana, a term Gautama did not originate, to grapple with the dilemma of the Buddha's teachings on no-self, anatta, in connection with karma and reincarnation. Reincarnation illustrates the soul's journey in samsara, as exemplified by Gautama's past life as the soul Samhita and his subsequent incarnations. His journey is an example to all souls. This idea of a reincarnating soul, therefore, posed a challenge to conventional Buddhism, trapping it in a corner. This notion of mindstream attempts to do away with the soul and explain what, not who, is accumulating karma and what, not who, is reincarnating. But this, in turn, raises another paradox. If there is no enduring self and we are in fact soulless, as mainstream Buddhism suggests, who or what is being liberated from suffering? As the mind stream of Mahayana Buddhism lacks an intrinsic realness and cannot survive liberation, we still need to answer, who is being liberated because Buddha told us something within us is. Otherwise, there would be no point for the enlightened one to show us the path, nor for us to embark upon it. Exploring contrasting views. The Southern Buddhists, the Theravadins, assert that what reincarnates is nothing other than the karmic formations, the samskaras, created by the 5 aggregates of a person, the skandhas, but nothing more. These 5 aggregates constitute the human experience and lead to the creation of karma. According to the Theravada teachings, there is no enduring self beyond these karmic formations that remains to be emancipated. This will be explained in detail in Part 4 on the skandhas and the law of karma. According to the theosophist Gottfried de Purucker, this is not possible. Quote, "It is obvious that results or consequences cannot survive the death of their originator, for the reason that if results or consequences are not portions of an entity, they have no existence in themselves, an act cannot survive, nor can a consequence." End quote. The underlying assertion is that our existence is transient rather than absolute, that our state of being alive is only a temporal conditioned state, termed in Buddhism as conventional existence. Ultimately, it suggests that, in the absolute sense, we do not exist. And this, I can assure you, Buddha did not teach. Even the Theravadins claim that there is a karmic self that survives, though they have no name for it. In the authoritative Dhammapada text, verse 12.160, dealing with the matter of the self, we find the following reflections. Quote, "The self is the master of self, for who else could be its lord? With the self thoroughly controlled, the man finds a master such as cannot elsewhere be found." End quote. The first self, with a capital S, here refers to the Atta or Atman, the real self, while the second self, with a lowercase s, refers to the lower human or conventional self. Buddha does not speak of the Atman directly, but rather calls it the Tathagata, in order to differentiate himself from the Brahmins. Puruker further explains, "Here is a pointed statement of the existence in the human constitution of the governing, controlling root self, the essential Atman or fundamental self, which lives and manifests its transcendent powers in and through the lower self or soul, the latter being naught but the compound aggregate of elements, which is the man in his ordinary being. The teaching of the Theravadins is thus true when it states that what remains of a man after his death is his karma, because this karma is the man himself. Nevertheless, there is something of a spiritual, intellectual, and psychological character, an X factor, around which this aggregated compound recollects itself at each new birth. It is this something by which the compound is reassembled and during life is held together as an entity." Puruker labeled this something as the X factor, which is paralleled in Mahayana Buddhism by the term mind stream, and in the Dhammapada as the karmic heap or residue. This is because Buddha did not speak explicitly about the soul, except perhaps in code. In due course, I am excited to unveil this discovery for you, as I firmly believe that Gautama encoded the answer to this X factor within the early Buddhist texts. However, to fully appreciate this discovery, it's essential that I first set the stage and lay the groundwork. Navigating through the conventional, we are poised to discover something real, something far more enduring and yet still elusive. It beckons us to look beyond the surface, to engage in a deeper exploration of our essence. The lost teachings of the Buddha have remained shrouded, but now await your discovery within these pages. I have long studied the esoteric teachings of spiritual traditions that teach causation, particularly karmic law, the spiritual and moral law of cause and effect, and I have found that the concept of no soul does not align with any traditional teachings on the subject. Herein lies the rub. If, in essence, we have no soul and there is no enduring purpose for our individual existence, then there is no thing, no self, no soul or mind stream that creates karma or requires redemption, and hence no need for the law of karma to exist. Are you with me so far? Before all this makes sense, the path will get a bit muddy at first, but stay with me. Let's walk through the mud together because what awaits on the other side is truly amazing. I will clarify these concepts more in depth as we journey together through the Buddhist landscape. The discomfort from stretching your mind is worth the trek of spiritual exploration. To my surprise, as I continued searching, I discovered that there is one other spiritual tradition, Jain Dharma or Jainism, that does not acknowledge a creator god or a divine source, such as Brahman, that exists within and beyond all creation. But even the Jains maintain a belief in the soul, the jiva, and see it as eternal, and Hindu scriptures also speak of the jiva as a living soul with a life force, one that has the breath of life. So why did Buddha say we have no soul? For a time, I witnessed the effects of this underlying anatta doctrine without understanding its origins, meaning, and ramifications, nor was I familiar with the term. Now I observed it everywhere in Buddhist philosophy. At this point in my life, this troubled me profoundly. I had experienced Gautama, the Buddha himself, on a personal level through my meditations, while chanting my mantras and during dictations, when the ascended Master Gautama spoke directly through the messenger, Elizabeth Clare Prophet. A dictation by an ascended master is like nothing else I've ever experienced. In a dictation, the living master speaks to the audience from the etheric plane, a realm of the heaven world, through the messenger thoroughly trained to vocalize the master's words. Before the dictation, the audience performs spiritual preparations to change the energy and vibration in the room by offering prayers, decrees, mantras, and songs to elevate their vibration and consciousness, allowing them to better integrate with the master's light, energy, and wisdom. Paraphrasing Elizabeth Clare Prophet, a dictation is a profound spiritual event. It represents the most elevated form of spiritual transfer, wherein the messenger, trained and anointed by the ascended masters, attains a deep meditative state to commune with God and the master who is about to speak. During the dictation, the ascended master overlays his or her spiritual presence and aura onto the messenger, using the messenger's vocal cords as a conduit, thereby allowing an instantaneous transfer of the master's words, consciousness, and spiritual radiation directly to the audience. Imagine Gautama as a living person walking among us, but on a spiritual plane, able to speak his words to the messenger, who hears them and immediately conveys those words to you in real time without reinterpretation. It's comparable to experiencing Gautama Buddha speaking to us again after 2,500 years, but now as an eternal being, still staying close to us as the ultimate bodhisattva, as he chose not to forever disappear into nirvana. I had always perceived the Buddha as a self-realized sage, an ascended master abiding in the heavenly realms with his true self and soul preserved. But now, I found myself pondering, how could Gautama, during his life as Siddhartha, assert that we have no self, no soul, and that everything is empty of intrinsic nature or essence? Was he contradicting himself millennia ago, or now in his dictations, or have his teachings been misinterpreted? I was puzzled, to say the least. What am I missing here? Am I asking the right questions? I decided to investigate further, because I had a feeling there is more to the story than meets the eye. Over the years, I've met with many seekers interested in Buddhism. Upon inquiring, I discovered that most were not familiar with the Anatta doctrine, nor some of the core teachings of Buddhism taught today. Seekers in general may not take the time to research the original teachings of the Buddha in great depth, as they are extensive and divergent. This predicament made me more determined to delve into the missing links in mainstream Buddhism, because I saw a gap here, a big gap, and only a few scholars were talking about it. I discovered over time that there were several later developed concepts not directly taught by Gautama, which present something very different from what Buddha originally imparted. I realized that if Buddha's core teachings are misconstrued and not properly grasped, because they are no longer taught in the spirit of the Buddha, the essence of what he communicated could easily lead us down the path of nihilism, which was never Buddha's intent. Gautama expressly declared, quote, "You, Vacha, from your own misperception have wrongly accused me of being an annihilator Natika. You have wrongly accused me of saying things I do not do, both formerly and now. I have never been a nihilist, never been the one who teaches the annihilation of a being. What I teach is suffering, and the cessation of suffering." End quote. In my research, I identified three pivotal doctrines in Buddhism: anatta, no self; shunyata, emptiness; and asvabhava, absence of intrinsic nature, which together transformed the Buddha's teachings into what we now call Buddhism, effectively turning his original teachings on their head. Throughout history, deviations from the original teachings of various spiritual traditions have repeatedly caused confusion and bewilderment, sometimes leaving us demoralized. This phenomenon should not be mistaken for progressive revelation, where new insights build upon existing teachings without altering their original message. Progressive revelation involves enhancing or deepening the original idea while remaining faithful to its initial intent. Progressive revelation is the belief that divine truth unfolds continually throughout time, adapting to humanity's evolving needs and levels of consciousness. Moreover, there is no such thing as final revelation, as spiritual guidance is ongoing through enlightened sages, prophets, or messengers who build upon the cardinal truths with new insights. Revelation also comes forth from the Atman, the God self of every individual as the still, small voice within. My insight is this: who are we to put the brakes on God? No one can assert that, from this point forward, God will cease to reveal truth to us, regardless of how fast or slow we evolve. Have you ever considered that even God exercises free will? As such, God can choose the timing and content of divine revelations based on the needs of each era and humanity's readiness to receive them. It reminds me of the age-old saying, "When the student is ready, the master appears." This is why cultivating prajna is essential. It takes us beyond conventional wisdom and cultivates inner discernment, a necessary component for enlightenment. It is evident that the path to enlightenment cannot be achieved through intellect alone. It serves us to a point at which we must leave it behind to enter the realm of the unknown and the arena of faith. For example, it curiously states in the Bible, Hebrews 11 verse 1, quote, "Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen," end quote, or Hebrews 11 verse 7, quote, "By faith Noah, being warned of God, of things not seen as yet, moved with fear, prepared an ark," end quote. This tells us we must trust, become vulnerable, surrender to the divine, and also prepare ourselves in order to having a direct experience. In Eastern traditions, emphasis is placed on inner exploration to attain direct experience rather than relying on faith. However, in the Saddha Sutta, the Buddha explains that faith, saddha, is the starting point for developing other Buddhist qualities, such as energy, mindfulness, concentration, and prajna wisdom. Faith provides the initial trust and motivation when starting out on the path, before a direct experience can confirm the Dharma teachings. He also taught us to take refuge in the three jewels of Buddhism, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, meaning the enlightened one, the teachings, and the community of followers. To take refuge is itself an act of trust and faith. In moments when we lack inner peace and experience thoughts and emotions of impatience, irritability, greed, pride, envy, anger, hatred, and vengeance, these emotionally charged states only serve to push away the inner guidance we seek. It seems that only in a state of humility, a childlike, peaceful state, does the Spirit enter to fill us with that eternal bliss and pure wisdom we seek, a concept beautifully captured in the saying, "Let go and let God." A return to the Buddha's original vision. As I came to understand the issue with the no-soul concept of anatta, I realized its deep interconnectedness with Gautama's other teachings. Beyond anatta, there are 4 additional concepts that explain and clarify the conditions of suffering. At first glance, these ideas may seem overwhelming, prompting us to think, that's too much to process. However, when these concepts are understood as a cohesive whole, they can reorganize our perception, leading to a higher awareness of why we suffer. These 4 insights are: 1. Impermanence, anicca, the realization that all things are in constant flux. Thus, impermanence is the root cause of suffering and unsatisfactoriness. 2. Dependent origination, paticca samuppada, the doctrine that illustrates the interconnected chain of causality, emphasizing our inherent dependence on exterior conditions. 3. Emptiness, shunyata, the concept that reveals how impermanence and dependence make all things devoid of permanent realness and independent existence. 4. Absence of intrinsic nature or realness, asvabhava, the principle that provides a deeper explanation as to why all phenomena are fundamentally empty. Let us briefly review these terms here. At the core of the Buddha's teachings, we find his profound insight that all sentient life and the material universe are in a constant state of flux and are therefore impermanent, anicca, which inevitably leads to suffering, dukkha. Impermanence underscores that the human self and its personality also undergo this constant flux, which reflects the duality of life and death, rotating in a never-ending cycle. It illustrates the transient nature of existence that inevitably leads to suffering. The Buddha further explained impermanence through his realization that nothing exists independently on its own, but arises dependent on many conditions in order to exist. These conditions form a chain of causality the Buddha called dependent origination, paticca samuppada. Because nothing is permanent, there is, therefore, no intrinsic nature or realness, asvabhava, in this temporal reality of form, including what we perceive as ourselves. What we think we are is not who we truly are. We are not the body, sensations, thoughts, or feelings. These are all non-self, anatta. Since these phenomena are transient and have no independent essence, they create the conditions for suffering. Clinging to what is constantly changing and disappearing ensures that we remain bound to suffering. For example, Gautama's insight into causality revealed that all things are intricately dependent on each other for their existence. A flower's existence depends on numerous conditions: nutrients from the soil, oxygen from the air, light rays and warmth from the sun, and water to sustain its vitality. He concluded that nothing in this world is permanent or self-sustained, and that these conditions lead to suffering or, at best, unsatisfactoriness. The next concept, central to the Buddha's teachings, is shunyata, often referred to as the emptiness concept. While the Buddha originally introduced this idea, it was famously articulated by the Buddhist sage Nagasena in the 2nd century BCE during his dialogue with King Menander I. Using what is now known as the chariot analogy, Nagasena explained anatta by showing that a chariot's identity depends on its constituent parts, wheels, axles, yoke, and so on. But none of these parts, individually or collectively, constitute the chariot itself. Building on this foundation, Nagasena related this emptiness to the 5 aggregates, or the 5 skandhas, of human existence, namely form, sensation, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. He asserted, these aggregates, skandhas, are all empty of the self, atta. It cannot be found in them. Centuries later, the Brahmin-born Buddhist scholar Nagarjuna, in the 2nd century CE, further expanded the concept of emptiness, shunyata. To add further complexity, Nagarjuna introduced the concept of absence of intrinsic nature, asvabhava, to deepen the explanation of emptiness. He argued that not only humans but all of creation is devoid of any intrinsic, enduring nature, asvabhava, and he speculated perhaps even God, Brahman. These concepts again relate back to suffering, dukkha, as we are deluded into thinking this world is solid, real, and somehow lasting. Buddhist councils have convened at various times to collect and codify the Buddha's teachings into canonical doctrines, thus etching in stone their established interpretations, whether accurate or misguided. Hence, mainstream Buddhism today presents a labyrinth of information, making it challenging to distinguish the Buddha's original teachings from commentaries on his sayings and later developed concepts by monks and scholars of various Buddhist schools. With all these conceptual frameworks that have emerged since the Buddha walked the earth, we encounter many challenges in the search for truth. This lack of cross-boundary research has created a chasm between the original teachings and all that came after, making it more difficult to discuss Gautama's teachings as he might have meant them, then and now. However, we now stand at a unique crossroads, where technology enables us to synthesize his ancient teachings with resurfaced lost teachings and Gautama's words spoken to us, through dictations in our time as an ascended master. All these intricate concepts may seem daunting, and indeed they are, but I was hooked. I felt deeply compelled to unravel how these pieces of the Buddhist puzzle fit together. My goal is to guide you through them in the most direct way, demystifying the paradoxical and making the seemingly incomprehensible clear. Let's journey on to see if we can find a perspective closer to what Gautama Buddha envisioned.